Welcome back, everybody. This is part two on Vincent van Gogh, and let's get started. We'll go through his work here. First, we'll go by categories. Sorry, landscapes, wonderful landscapes. And one thing, this is a characteristic of all good artists, but you know, Van Gogh had this sensitivity to nature. It's something that made him feel good. And so, he had this relationship with nature that, he was hyper aware of what was going on there. But he also had the talent to articulate it back to us. And, you got to be able to do both. And he was a master of that. That inner life of anything, as Kandinsky talked about Cezanne. So the great writer Willa Cather wrote books like Old Pioneer and My Antonia and Death Comes to the Archbishop. She grew up in the Sandhills of Nebraska, and a lot of her work, there's geography in there, and a sense of the power of nature and its wonder. And she says this about looking out at the landscape and where she grew up. More than anything else, I felt emotion in the landscape, in the fresh, easy blowing morning wind, and in the earth itself, as if the shaggy grass were a sort of loose hide, and underneath it, heads of buffalo were galloping. And so, this beautiful, fur of the buffalo here that we're seeing on the surface, but underneath there's a river under the river, and it's this, this powerful herd of buffalo. And I think that's apropos for a Van Gogh landscape. More of his beautiful work. And this is a picture I Googled, Provence and countryside, and I got this image up and compare it to Van Gogh's work, and how his imagination took these plots of different farming fields and the way the plains intersect and overlap, it's etc. And Van Gogh takes those and makes them into this this wonderful image. And he all these brushstrokes of his that were this very dynamic, very bold, and very strong, and very obvious. But not too obvious that it's obnoxious. There's a harmony here, and it kind of everything dissolves and in sync, and that takes talent to be able to make that come together like that. So look at this painting, and then look at this painting. One of these is a fake, and it can happen. You look up an artist and you Google it and then look at the images, and every once in a while they'll be like, oh, that's Degas or that's Michelangelo or whatever, and then you look a little further and it's just somebody's reproduction. And I had, well, I originally believed this is the real painting, but this is the fake. As I had looked at this painting here one day, and I just noticed this like creepy, skull up here. And there's also like the remnants of another skull in the making over here. And I thought, okay, that'd be some joker, putting this kind of mystical stuff into a Van Gogh painting. But lo and behold, this painting here, it's in the, I don't know if it's in the lobby, but somewhere in the building of the Rhode Island School of Design. It's their painting, and that's the real deal. And I don't know, I just found that quite interesting. More landscape. And I love this painting, and a good painting is you're going to have this, you're going to have this feeling of melting into it and dissolving into it. And these two ladies here in front are definitely, obvious to the painting, but step back a little bit, close your eyes, open them back up. And in a sense, this is an organic whole going on, it's like it's complete. And that saying all is one and one is all, comes to mind. And, and the Yeats poem about how do we know the dancer from the dance? It's kind of a characteristic of a good piece of art. The crows. Love this painting here. This blue and green is always, I don't know, it's always gets my attention. And I'm in the mountains here in southern Colorado a lot, and this is a recent photo in October of 2024, or actually it was late September 2024. And just look how much this actual photograph syncs with this painting of Van Gogh. And it's pretty cool. Lots of landscapes. And I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but as far as Starry Night goes, there were 21 versions of that, something I didn't know. I always thought there was just this one painting. But he would go out at night or paint the night, quite a bit. And there's stories he would go stand under a street light or put candles on his hat. It's like I don't think anybody really knew, but he said basically he would look up at the stars and he could see hundreds, but he would know that there are thousands behind them and even millions more behind them. And this is a quote: "It is an inextinguishable light." And my take is, he resonates with nature, and there's nothing more, you know, fantastic about nature than looking at the stars on a dark night. And there's truth in that in a sense, and that gives him a sense of belonging, that he belongs to this bigger space. And I think that's something that he wanted to share with us. And this comfort that he received from being in nature and feeling like he belonged, he gave it to us. Another nighttime painting. This is one of his earlier works, and I thought this was quite proficient. You know, well, we can make comments on it, but there's a lot of good in that painting. And it's a few paintings here of the worker. This is where he felt that kindred spirited with these people that had this incredible relationship with nature, and maintained this dignity and nobility about themselves, even though they were in the worst of circumstances. Some would like a cab horse on the streets of Paris or London or Antwerp. Yeah, peasants, workers. And I'm not sure I mentioned this, but Van Gogh said one can paint all of humanity by the simple means of a portrait. It's like Cezanne. He sensed the inner life of a teacup. Van Gogh could sense the inner life of a farm field. He could sense the inner life of another human being. And it said he was always desperate for a model. He put people off. That first impression was never, he never really overcame making that any better. And so, and he didn't have any money, so it was very hard for him to, make a model happen. But there would be days where he would find somebody in another person, and from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, he was painting somebody all day long. And again, it's one of the ways he experienced intimacy. And yeah. Oh yeah. So I have a friend that he went to visit another friend of ours' son that was at the University of Pennsylvania. It's quite some time ago, and there was a exhibit of Van Gogh's portrait at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. My friend's not an artist at all, but he's open minded and likes anything that's of beauty, et cetera, et cetera. So he and our friend's son go to the exhibit, and I don't have my details right here, but I'm saying they walk into a room. There's 50 portraits, let's say, that Van Gogh had done. Even 20, whatever it is. The room is just full of Van Gogh portraits. And my friend said he just wanted to collapse and curl up in a ball. It was so intense in that room. And imagine it's like it's all these people in the room, their pictures, but there's Van Gogh was so intense that he could pick up the intense in somebody else. And you have all these individuals and their individual intensity in that room coming together. And it was quite the energy, quite the energy. This and the portrait back here is the postmaster. I believe his name was Rulin and Arl. And this is his wife, Augustine, and her baby. And she said for Vincent, and she had told her husband that she didn't want to do it anymore, that it wasn't the most pleasant experience for her. But, sitting for anyone is really not the most fun. But Vincent was probably pretty difficult to be with for too long a period of time. A little detail here in the painting. More portraits. It's Dr. Gachet. Sicker than I am, as Vincent said. And this is Mrs. Janot. We'll talk about her in a second. Did several paintings of her. And I'd seen this painting for many years, or one of them, and I always thought it was, there was just one. So, to do the work, you sometimes take one and you copy it, and you see something different every time. Vincent worked, sun up, sundown every day. Self-portrait. I love this painting. I don't know much about it, but it's just, I don't know, the colors are just fantastic. Sunflowers. We're into the still lifes. Books. He painted several paintings of books. And here's another one of the lines from his letters that I like. That paints him as kind of a regular, heartfelt kind of guy. He said, "So often a visit to a bookshop has cheered me and reminded me that there are good things in this world. I think that I have it in my heart to someday to paint a bookshop with the front yellow and pink in the evening like a light in the midst of the darkness." Well, I don't think he ever painted the bookshop, but this Night Terrace Cafe painting here in Arl, in the yellow house in Arl, it's like, light in the midst of darkness. There's kind of this yellow and the pink, let's call it orange here. It's a warm red in there. He painted several paintings of boots and shoes. It's like Cezanne again, the inner life of anything, even inanimate objects. Same with a chair. And the Madame Junot that we showed the several portraits of. Now, this one blew me away. She and her husband, Joseph, they owned the cafe that was, right down the street from the Yellow House. And Vincent would, paint all day in the daylight, and then at night he would go hang out into the Cafe de la Guerre. And in his letters, he said, "This is the ugliest painting I have ever done." And drifters and hooligans, a place where one can ruin oneself, go mad, commit a crime. I have tried to express a terrible passion of humanity. So when I read that letter, I'm like, okay, what painting is he talking about? And then I, figured it out, and it's like, it's this one. And I've always looked at this painting, it's like, what beautiful warmth is in that room. And this is not the best image, but there's just a beautiful green that contrasts with this red and yellow and orange in here. And I thought, this is one of the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen. Well, what he's saying is, the people that hang out in there are, it's pretty rough crowd. And if anybody knows, kind of the rough crowd and what's going on in their world, it's Vincent. And, and I kind of taken this a step further, it might be a stretch, but it's like, he knows ugly like nobody else. He can look in the mirror and he can identify it quite easily. And he sees this room and he takes that ugly and he makes it into something beautiful. And, as much as it was hard for him to fit in, I'm thinking this is one of his ways why he's trying to make things right. So a few of his early drawings here. This was from Bornage when he was there as the minister. And he drew, early on. It's just, I don't know, a lot of people probably drew, and it wasn't a passion for him, but it was just something he liked to do every now and then. And probably, when he decided to be an artist, it's like, hey, I like to draw, this works. And this is something, a picture of he did again in Germinal. And then I love the way he makes his marks. They're very energetic, his brush strokes, etc. But we're talking about a pen or a pencil here. And it's kind of like crawl before you walk. Before you're going to oil paint, it helps to kind of to draw and get your rhythm down. And I think the way he marked up the canvas, you can see it here in the pencil drawings. It goes to he was, it's that rhythm in his head that he was that he was soothing. He would get in sync with that and start articulating what he sensed with nature. And this is what happened. And again, all these dots here in this painting, not a lot of strokes in a sense, but just dot, 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 like stars. And then, Starry Night, he picks up on this energy that at night that he sees in the air, and it's not dot, 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 dot. It's this, this flow of something electromagnetic, I'm not sure, but he's painting what he senses, what he feels. Here a drawing of the yellow house, and it's like, notice how the sky is horizontal and the building is vertical, and then the paving stones are, dot, dot, dot. And that makes complete sense. The sky is sort of a horizontal entity. The building is a vertical entity, and this ground is just dot, dot, dot of stones and dirt and pieces of sand. So examples of the drawing with, an actual painting. And how he takes these marks that he learns to do with the pencil and puts them into the paint. So let's talk about Emile Bernard and Paul Gauguin. They were closer to him than Lautrec was, but they were great artists in their own right. And that, let's say it's 1885, 1887. They're respected among Monet and Cezanne, etc. They're not at the top of the list, but they're right in there. But Van Gogh's not, for some reason. I'm sure some of it had to do with his personality. But even in spite, Theo, his brother, the famous art dealer, or a recognized, reputable art dealer, they can't get his work sold. And but so here's a little bit of Bernard. Here's a Gauguin, another couple of Gauguins. And when Gauguin and Van Gogh lived for a few months in that yellow house in Arles, they each painted a portrait of the other. And this is Gauguin's painting of Van Gogh. So let's compare Bernard to Van Gogh. And it's like Van Gogh to Gauguin. They're both great. It's Van Gogh's as good as they are. But for some reason, it just wasn't working. And let's take it even further. And there are other four great artists: Matisse, Cezanne, Monet, and Picasso. Let's compare those guys to Van Gogh. Van Gogh to Cezanne. And this is a cropped image of one of Van Gogh's paintings on the left, and a cropped image out of one of Cezanne's Mount Saint Victoire paintings. And just the softness of each one of them, and look at Van Gogh. He's got this, great, furious, heavy, thick paint brush strokes, but it still comes across as sensual and soft, and, again, it'd be Cezanne would be the same thing. He's got the peak of Saint Victoire, which is, this big, obvious, loud noise on the painting, but he's got it melded in soft and sensuously. Van Gogh versus Monet. Van Gogh versus Picasso. So Picasso was a big fan of Van Gogh's. We'll talk about him next week. He spent a considerable amount of time. He kind of dropped everything he was painting and said, "All right, I'm going to study Van Gogh really hard." And this is a painting he did. I think he's 70 years old, and he was on a trip coming back from the south of France, and he was near Arles, I believe is the story. And he painted this painting. And he was like, "It's like I'm going to do a Van Gogh," and just look how similar they are in many, many ways. And, Picasso is copying Van Gogh, which has got to say something. And then Matisse. So the point here is, when I first started comparing these, it just came to me one day, well, why did Van Gogh not, get his due? And they said, well, let me compare to these other great artists, and maybe I can see where he wasn't quite up to their game. Well, it's like I saw that, and it was like he's had it all along, and everybody's telling him he didn't, which is very sad in many ways. Um, and they said his paintings were clumsy, and and in one sense too, they were very expressive, and maybe people weren't just ready for that extra level of expression. And we can compare them to Monet and Cezanne, and you can see that Van Gogh's with the expressions a little bit up, the colors a little bit more amped, the obviousness of the brush stroke is a little more amped. But also consider this: Cezanne really didn't take off until after he passed away. His work didn't across Europe until like 1907. There was an exhibit, and I think another one in 1912, and he really became all the rage. Well, how long had Cezanne been painting? He'd been painting for almost 50 years when this took place. Monet, for 10 years, he was in complete poverty. It took him, another 5 or 10 years before he was established as a reputable commercial artist in a sense. And that Les Oranges, his big water lilies, it opened in 1927. He had passed away the year before at the age of I think 86. So it's like, and Picasso, Matisse, both 10, 15 years, their first 10 or 15 years, even though they are recognized among their peers as good artists, they went nowhere in the world of commercial art. And maybe, that's kind of how it works. You just think about it, that the museums are pretty set on who they have and who they're promoting. And it's probably hard to get them to nudge and start, taking on new artists and new painters. It takes a while. And Van Gogh, he only painted 10 years. So it's like to expect for him to have expected that he was going to be among these great artists. It's it was a little bit premature, and possibly the way he pushed the envelope with his expression, we just weren't ready for it. So let's talk about the Museum of Modern Art in 1934, 35, 36, a very popular exhibit in the United States. The versus Europe, that Van Gogh was catching on in Europe thanks to his brother's widow, Johanna, and her son. And what I'm thinking is too, we're talking about the Depression. It's the 1930s, mid 1930s, and you're an American, and there's a lot of misery out there. And you see a Van Gogh with this beautiful colors, this beautiful energy, and it's uplifting. And then you hear his story, and it's like, well, let's just dig deep like Van Gogh and persevere. And he never got his due. He's the underdog, and it's kind of like again, it gives you some hope. And then these wonderful paintings, it's like, it's a break from your misery. And there are a lot of reasons why somebody that's having a rough go of life could relate to Van Gogh. One, his story, and then two, the real wonderful energy that the paintings bring forth. Yeah, so relating like the potato eaters and the cab horse, you're in the Depression and you still have a little bit of dignity about you, and Van Gogh helps you get there. So let me read this letter. This is from Alfred Barr. It's written in, let's see, December 28th or 29th, 1935. Yeah. So Barr is the head of the Museum of Modern Art. He's the one that's responsible for putting together the Van Gogh show. And so he talks in this letter over and over about why is Van Gogh so popular. He said, since the opening of the Vincent Van Gogh exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, November 5th, 1935, more than 100,000 persons have seen it. At the exhibition will be on view through January 5th. It is expected that the total attendance will rise considerably above that figure. A number of theories have been advanced to account for the tremendous popularity of the great modern Dutch artist. In the opinion of Alfred H. Barr, Jr., director of the museum, Van Gogh's popularity is just what the artist himself would most passionately have desired. Again and again, said Mr. Barr, Van Gogh wrote of his desire to make pictures for laborers, peasants, miners, weavers, fishermen, postmen, seamen, and shopkeepers. In short, the great aesthetically naive public. And it's like for the common man, let's say, that, the person that doesn't understand art, doesn't spend time with art, and all of a sudden Van Gogh's socking them right between the eyes. It is a central miracle of Van Gogh's artistic career that with such an evangelical desire for popularity, he never for a single moment compromised with the popular taste of his time, which was then even more lazy, conventional, and unadventurous than it is now. In other words, Van Gogh's pushing the envelope, what he's saying, and and did it on his own. Of course, the books written about Van Gogh's sensational, unhappy life have increased the public interest in his art, but the books themselves would never have been written had not Van Gogh been, first of all, a great artist. That he should also be a popular artist, probably more popular than any other artist of the past or present, is really remarkable when one recalls that he has been dead only 50 years. So why are Van Gogh's paintings popular? One is tempted to say that his popularity depends on the very qualities which shocked and puzzled people not only during his lifetime, but for 30, 40 years after his death. For it is only recently that this gay, decorative, exaggerated color, his tortured drawing, his flat, unconventional perspective in the direct, passionate emotionalists have attracted rather than repelled the general public. He's trying to point out some of the revolutionary things we talked about, like Gogh, that people are not used to seeing paintings this way, that Van Gogh did. That it's unusual that people would take this unusual bent on it and run with it. So only a few years ago, for instance, the art critic of the leading morning paper of one of our largest cities wrote, Van Gogh was a crazy galot whose paintings at their worst resemble the crude elemental expressions which nitwits affix to sidewalks, barn doors, and elsewhere, especially elsewhere. End quote. Ironically enough, this season, less than 10 years after this criticism was written, a museum of that very city, New York City, will act as a willing host to a guest exposition of Van Gogh's art. So, and then he goes on to talk about some of these books that have been written about Van Gogh and how popular they are. And he does mention here the Irving Stone's book, Lust for Life. He said it began with a 10,000 volume printing and rose into the bestseller list almost from the date of the publication. Although it has maintained its popularity exceedingly well, the publisher report a decided spurt in sales since the opening of the exhibit. He's saying, well, the exhibit is helping sales of the book. But his point was, when the book was written, before anybody saw his work, that, it took off. So the story does have some significance in why people love Van Gogh's art. But, when it's all said and done, as Bart pointed out, it's all about the art. And, another artist that kind of, same thing with Van Gogh would be Jackson Pollock. He died very young from a tragic accident, drunk driving, that he was responsible for. But he pushed the envelope to a new level and had the tragic story either. Monet, Cezanne, Picasso, Matisse, they didn't have tragic stories, but they pushed the envelope up. But their work is what made them popular, as Pollock's did and Van Gogh's did as well. And it's interesting too for me that put together here, Neffe and Smith, they wrote this book about Pollock. It's a complete biography of Pollock. It's an incredibly wonderful, insightful book, just like the one is about Van Gogh. And it's kind of hard not to, kind of put these two guys together and think about them in the same light. It's Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's quite popular today. He died in the mid 80s from a heroin overdose, and I think he was 30 years old. But he took expression to like a hyper level. And you could there's some similarities between his life and Vincent van Gogh's. So let's talk about, instead of the story, the quality that I think is the most obvious in understanding Van Gogh, his contribution to what he did differently. And it deals with expression. As Bernard said, he was a painter, and on the scene around 1890, he was the most expressive. And this expression, what is expression? It's kind of diving deep in your soul, and the risk is you overshare in a sense. But the world was ready for a deeper look inside ourselves, and Van Gogh gave us that. And the great French author Victor Hugo in the early 1800s, mid 1900s, he said, "Greater than the tread of mighty armies is an idea whose time has come." And like Monet and Cezanne, the way they did things differently. Van Gogh is the way he expressed was something different, and its time had come. And they talk about Van Gogh influenced the German expressionists. Here, these are paintings from, I believe this is a Kandinsky on the left, and I know this is a Schmidt Roloff, Carl Schmidt Roloff. They were German expressionists. So around the turn of the century, Van Gogh has passed away 10 years or so, but they look at Van Gogh and I like that. That's very expressive. That's high energy. I want to paint that. And they start painting that way. Van Gogh gave them the permission. As Matisse, same thing. Matisse had a period in the early 1900s known as the Fauve period, which in French translates to wild beast. Again, it was like Van Gogh went first, and he's starting to get popular. They look at his work, they go, "That's pretty cool." And this overexpression compared to what was normally expressed, begins to take hold. And comparing a Van Gogh with a Schmidt Roloff, this German expression, you can see how the German has amped it up. But this Van Gogh and this painting, look how similar they are. It's like, they're both dealing with that same energy that nature provides us. And then a Van Gogh and a Matisse from his Fauve period. And again, Van Gogh had it all along. And then I think of, Van Gogh influencing the modern art, the real modern, or the extremely modern art of the 1950s, the abstract expression period that took off then and is still with us in a big way today. And that looking up at the stars, I always, when I look at this Pollock painting, I kind of go to that night stars and that night energy and that sense of infinity that Vincent talked about when he's painting a portrait. It's just being transcended into, this magical space. And, expression. This is a Picasso painting, one of his earlier paintings on the right. But, Picasso was famous for, he would take the figure and, he would alter it in, very dramatic fashion. And it's like, how dare you? Well, Van Gogh had done that with the potato eaters some 50 years before Picasso, in a sense, or 25 or 40 years, let's say. But again, it's this expression and I think people criticize Van Gogh's painting. It's like, well, they're just too ugly, those people. And he's like, well, no, that's the real deal. I'm expressing what's really there. And in a sense, you could say Picasso that we'll talk about next week. There was a bit of him that he wanted to tell the complete picture, ugly and beautiful as well. And forget this is a person and the figure is not in the right proportions, etc. But take it back or turn it upside down or sideways. It's still a beautiful application of the paint. And it's going to speak to you, from 30, 50 yards away. If you see that image and you don't know it's really a figure, it's just a beautiful piece of work. And one of the things that I think that comes through in Van Gogh's painting, is especially from reading his letters, there's this incredible wisdom that he holds at a very young age, and there's a real tenderness about him. And landscapes, that's not as easy reflected as it is with a portrait. And the people are intense, but there's a tenderness there too. And he knew how to, source that inner life of people. And I like the way this all kind of melts into each other, like Cezanne and Monet knew how to do. And then I love this worker painting. It's like this guy is out there working hard. And, even he's got a sharp, crushing instrument here doing some, destructive work. But if you look at this painting, it's soft and sensuous and it's beautiful. And how he puts that inner life of that hardworking peasant, into perspective, and makes him one with nature back here. It's just, he understood a lot about life and he knew how to articulate it. And then lastly, I talk about how he, with this painting, The Night Cafe, how he took something that he said was the ugliest painting he had ever done, and it's one of the most beautiful paintings he's ever done, and how he gave us this beauty, ugly and all. And what do I say here? So he's digging deep into our experience, and he articulated it with paint. Van Gogh dug deep. He worked his fanny off doing these paintings, and I'm sure he was obsessed too hard at times. But he dug as deep as could possibly dig, just like a potato eater is digging all day to bring those potatoes up out of the field. And it's just a case of, we're better off the more we know ourselves. And, it was an honest expression of the good and the bad. And in a sense, this hyper expression, it just gave us a way to look a little deeper into ourselves. And that's what Van Gogh knew how to do. So also too, let me mention this, Johanna, the widow of Theo, the brother Theo. So she's newly married. She has a baby, under 1 year old, and her husband dies, and she's left with nothing, and except all these Vincent van Gogh paintings, which in 1890 there were glimmers of hope that the show in Brussels and the show in Paris, where Monet said was the best show. So she's got something here, and she takes it and she runs with it. And during the period of, say, 1890 to 1930, let's say Europe opens up, forget the war in there, for a little while, but art starts crossing all kinds of boundaries. Art from Berlin goes to Paris. Art from Paris goes to London. Art from London goes to Vienna. And she makes sure that, she does what she needs to do to get Van Gogh's work in there. So his popularity begins to take off in Europe. And then she passes away in 1925. And then it's her son, Vincent, the Van Gogh's namesake, his nephew, takes it on from there. But I would think it'd probably be make for a good movie to what Johanna did with her life is after her husband had passed away up until the time she passed away. All right, so that's the end. Um, Almost there's never an ending to Van Gogh. He keeps on, he's the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you very much. That's the end of our story. See you next week when we talk about the great Pablo Picasso. Take care. Thank you.